For decades, the Bermuda Triangle sold more books, funded more documentaries, and filled more television schedules than almost any other mystery on Earth. Hundreds of ships and aircraft were said to have vanished inside a roughly 700,000 square kilometers stretch of the North Atlantic between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. The explanations on offer ranged from methane eruptions to time portals to extraterrestrial activity. When the full body of available evidence is examined properly, what emerges is a synthesis that researchers had been building toward for years, but that never reached a mainstream audience. Here is what that analysis found. The mystery was manufactured before the facts were checked. The Bermuda Triangle, as a named phenomenon, dates to a 1964 article by Vincent Gaddis in Argosy magazine, and the version of events that entered public consciousness was built almost entirely on unchecked sources. Charles Berlitz's 1974 book on the subject sold over 20 million copies, citing disappearances that either never occurred outside the triangle entirely, or occurred under conditions that carried straightforward explanations. The data set the mythology rests on is corrupted at the foundation. Lawrence David Kusha, a librarian at Arizona State University, spent years cross-referencing Berlitz's cases against Lloyd's of London shipping records, U.S. Coast Guard incident reports, and contemporary newspaper accounts. His findings, published in 1975, dissolved case after case under scrutiny or showed incidents were located geographically outside the triangle. The mystery did not survive contact with its own source material, and any serious synthesis of the historical record arrives at the same conclusion Kusha reached 50 years ago. The Bermuda Triangle carries an extraordinary reputation built on ordinary events that nobody bothered to verify before the books went to print. The disappearance rate is not anomalous. Lloyd's of London, the insurance market that prices maritime risk with more precision than any institution on Earth, does not charge higher premiums for vessels transiting the Bermuda Triangle, and that single data point carries more weight than 100 documentary specials. Lloyd's prices risk based on actuarial data across millions of voyages, and their actuaries found nothing worth charging extra for. The U.S. Coast Guard reached the same conclusion independently, stating that the number of incidents in the triangle does not represent a statistically significant deviation from comparable ocean areas of similar traffic volume. What the mythology required was raw numbers without a denominator, because the Bermuda Triangle sits between the eastern seaboard of the United States, the Caribbean, and the Atlantic shipping lanes, making it one of the most heavily transited stretches of ocean in the world. And more traffic produces more incidents. Normalize the disappearance figures against traffic volume and compare them to the North Sea, the South China Sea, or the Mediterranean, and the triangle's rate drops to unremarkable. The weather explains what the statistics don't. What the Bermuda Triangle actually has, which the mythology never seriously engaged with, is some of the most unpredictable weather in the entire Atlantic basin. The region sits at the convergence of the Gulf Stream, warm Caribbean air masses, and cold fronts pushing down from the North American interior, and that combination generates waterspouts, sudden squalls, and micro-weather events that develop faster than most vessels can respond to and never appear on regional forecasts. Running through the triangle at speeds up to 2.5 meters per second, the Gulf Stream alone is strong enough to disperse wreckage and obscure the location of a sinking within hours of it happening. Compare the timing of confirmed disappearances with historical weather data for the region, and the majority of verified incidents cluster around periods of documented meteorological instability. No supernatural mechanism required. The ocean in that stretch is genuinely dangerous, and the danger is entirely explainable by what is already known about the weather and the water. Flight 19. The case that built the myth. 5 U.S. Navy TBM Avenger torpedo bombers vanished during a training exercise off the coast of Florida on December 5, 1945, and that incident, known as Flight 19, remains the most cited evidence for a Bermuda Triangle anomaly. The incident records, flight logs, and radio transcripts tell a different story. Flight leader Lieutenant Charles Taylor had less experience with the specific route than his rank implied, and the radio transcripts show him convinced early in the flight that he was over the Florida Keys when navigational evidence placed him over the Bahamas, a 200-kilometer error that sent the formation northeast into open ocean rather than west toward the Florida coast. Taylor refused suggestions from other pilots to fly west. The formation ran low on fuel after dark over open water, and the Navy's formal inquiry classified all 5 losses as pilot error and navigational confusion. The rescue aircraft that later disappeared, a Mariner flying boat, was seen by a merchant vessel to explode in midair shortly after takeoff, which matches the Mariner's documented vulnerability to fuel vapor ignition. That problem was so widely known among its crews that the aircraft earned the nickname the Flying Gas Tank. 2 incidents, both explained, both foundational to 50 years of mythology. The methane hypothesis, real science, wrong location. One of the more scientifically literate explanations proposed for the Bermuda Triangle involves methane hydrate eruptions from the seafloor. Destabilized gas deposits could release sudden columns of gas capable of reducing water density enough to sink a ship, and they could disrupt aircraft engines passing above. The science behind methane hydrate destabilization is documented. Australian researchers reproduced the mechanism in laboratory conditions, and they identified geological evidence of ancient eruptions off the Norwegian coast. None of that evidence, though, extends to the Bermuda Triangle. The seafloor geology beneath the triangle does not match the conditions that produced documented eruptions elsewhere. No active methane hydrate fields at scales or frequencies that would account for the claimed disappearances have been identified beneath it, and no physical evidence of methane-related sinking has been recovered from any confirmed incident in the region. The mechanism is plausible in principle and absent in practice. What the ocean actually took. Strip out the unverified incidents, the incidents outside the geographic boundary, and the incidents with documented explanations, and what remains is a list of losses consistent with the expected attrition rate for a heavily trafficked ocean region with challenging weather, strong currents, and significant small aircraft and recreational vessel traffic. The Atlantic Ocean does not return most of what it takes because wreckage disperses, currents carry debris hundreds of kilometers, and the deep water beyond the continental shelf swallows aircraft and small vessels without leaving surface evidence. That is not a mystery. It is how oceans work, and it works the same way in the North Sea, in the Pacific approaches to Japan, and in every other stretch of open water that carries comparable traffic without a mythology attached to it. The Bermuda Triangle mystery survived for 50 years, not because the evidence supported it, but because the evidence was never seriously checked before it reached an audience of millions. Couchet had documented the truth in 1975, Lloyd's had priced it into their actuarial tables, and the U.S. Coast Guard had stated it formally, but those conclusions existed separately across decades of research and never cohered into a single accessible account. Put the facts back in, and the triangle disappears, which, given the mythology, is the most fitting ending it could have had.